All right, welcome everybody to another session of Lab Live. We are going to be looking at how to optimize your Revit templates for your project. We do have the chat window open, so if you guys want to ask any questions or comment, that is highly encouraged. And so you can definitely do that. I want to talk a little bit about who we are, just in case you never heard of us. You're like, who are these guys and why are they talking to me? We're full service computational design, BIM consulting firms, basically just helping architects, contractors, engineers out with Revit templates, computational design, scripting, things like that. So why is a template important? Well, template is important because if you are starting a new project and you have things that you set up all the time are typically a time suck, right? So what you want to do is try to start a project that is set up, has all of your schedules, all of your title blocks, not all of your title blocks, but the ones that you use the most often, and we're going to get into some of that. You want to look at different view types and things like that, things that you don't want to set up for every single time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at some of these different processes that exist for setting up a template. And I'm not big into PowerPoint. I want to get right into it. So I'm going to jump out of here and just show you guys a couple things that I've learned myself when working in a Revit template. So the first thing is you can start a template basically one of two ways. You can either start your template from the out-of-the-box Revit templates that they provide you. So they have, these commercial construction, residential templates, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, etc., depending on your discipline. And so through here, what we want to try to do is either take one of these, save as to your project file location, and then go ahead and start projects from there. The other option is maybe you did a project and there's a bunch of information in that project file that you don't necessarily want to lose. And maybe it's more efficient to start from that project file. Now, there's all kinds of challenges with that, one of which is that the project file may have a bunch of, crap that you don't necessarily want brought into your template. So you want to do that with caution. But let's say that you do want to do that. So right here, I have a Revit project with Workshare enabled, okay? And one of the challenges that people often run into is they'll go, okay, well, I want to save my template for my project. I'm just going to go ahead and do a save as, and oh, how come the template is grayed out? That's interesting. So I can't save that. Well, the reason is because we have Workshare enabled. And so basically what we need to do is we need to disallow that work sharing to be able to save a template from that project. And so if I go to big R, new project, or open project, and I navigate to my project file, I'm just going to go right into here. And so I have this Revit project that exists, this RVT file. What I can do is I can open that detach from central right here, this little checkbox. And I get two options. So the secret or the magic to this is you have to say detach and discard work sets. This is how you're able to accommodate this. And that's fine. And you should then, and it's not going to let me, dang it, because I have it open. Go figure when you're doing a live webinar. So if I take this and let's just save as, and I'm going to save this as a test webinar, right? Because we're on a webinar. And I'm going to save that. And now if I close that file, and I'm going to go ahead and open that one up. And dang it, look at this. So I'm not doing a very good job right now. I needed to save that as a central file. You guys give me some grace here. Project, open this up, detached. And what you want to do is make sure that you save this as a project file And let's make sure all that's checked. We should be good. Detached. And then once you open this, then you should be able to save this as a template. So you can see again, I have it, the template's grayed out. And hopefully this works. If it doesn't, I'm going to move on. But I tested this before we started, and it should work. Detach from central. Detach and discard work sets. And one more time. Third time's a charm. Save as template. It's not working. I'm doing something wrong. And I don't know what it is. I apologize. We're going to move on from that one, and I'll post a solution to that later. It worked 10 minutes ago during the testing, and it's not working now. That's OK. But you can do that. You can detach, discard work sets, save as, and you can make a template from your project file. I promise. I'm not lying to you. So those are basically the two ways that you can start, either starting from a template and saving as, or saving as a project. We talked about some of the challenges of the project being, data that's in there that you don't want. There's also different things that you can put into your template. And so I'm going to look at just a couple of those. As example, this is a template that we built. And this was for a client. Basically, she does a lot with single-family residential. But she has to do a lot of these analysis, floor area ratio, green points, permeable versus impermeable. And so what we did is we broke out these categories. So there's no hard, fast rule for some of this when you're doing these different views. It's kind of how you want to set them up. And so you have the analysis, architecture, electrical, interiors, and site in this example. So how do you change some of this? What if you want to switch it up? You want something different? What you can do is you can right-click on this browser, this category here, and you can either create a new one or you can edit this one. And my good friend John Pearson loves to get the phasing organized within the browser, and I think that's a good idea. And so I'm going to just show here that right now I don't have phasing included in my view browser, but I'm going to add phasing. And so it's basically like schedules, sorting and grouping these views, similar to how you would kind of sort and group the schedules. And so in here, it's sorting and grouping by view category first, then type. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change this to by phase, and then I'm going to change this to type. So what it's going to do now is it's going to sort and group by view category first, then phase, then type. And so if I hit OK on this and I hit OK, you can see in here now I have this other tier of new construction, which was not there before. And so I can have my category, my phase, and then my different view types. And you can kind of mix and match these to your heart's content, whatever you think is best. And so this is one way you could break this out. And then so if we had other ways of, or other phases in here, you could go ahead and add some of those as well. So that's one way that you want to kind of be thinking about for your users. How do you want them to set that? How do you want them to work? Another one that I really like a lot is I'll break these out by use. So like if you have working views, construction views, being permit views, that is. And if you have linked views that you want to be able to link in other views from your consultants or into their file. Those are a couple different ways. What are working views? Some people always ask me, they're like, what the heck are you talking about a working view? Think of it like your bum wad if you're old enough to be dealing with bum wad, or if you still do, if you're bucking the times and you're like, you know what, I'm still using bum wad. Think of it kind of like your bum wad. You can kind of go through there and update information in here that no one else sees. So the key is that it has to be detail information though. So like if you have your building in here and you delete a wall, of course, if you delete that wall, it's deleting everywhere. But if you want to study that wall and you don't necessarily want your dimensions showing up on the permit drawings, you can go through here and no one else can see these except for you. So those are one way that you can also break it up, is by working views, Presentation view is another one that I didn't mention. Presentation views are views that neither are working views or printed views that go for permit, but they're views that maybe you do some renderings or some floor plan diagrams and things like that that you don't necessarily send out for permit, but you do want in a presentation either to a client or internally. So those are what you could use for some of your presentation views. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of mix and match, break this up into different scenarios. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is view templates. So with your view templates, you can go ahead and put in certain information that you want to apply to all views. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on view templates because they could deserve their own discussion all by themselves. But I do want to bring up a couple of their gotchas, as well as some lessons learned in my own life. So I was working with someone, and they were going through their interior elevations of casework. And they had all these views that were on their interior elevations, and they were having to hide every single level in the elevation. So they'd activate the view, they'd hide the level, deactivate view, move on to the next one. And they did this for about 2 hours before they came over to me. And they said, Bill, is there a faster way to do this? And I said, yeah, you use view templates. So just as an example, let's look at this floor plan. And let's say that I have a architecture floor plan view template. And let's say that for this one, I want kind of a clean view with no grids. And so I could go to the annotation category, and I could turn off grids. And I could say, OK. And then you can see that my grids went away. I no longer have the grids. The scale also changed because the scale is different for that view template. And so in here, that's how view templates work, where you can mass apply these view settings to views. Now, a couple of their gotchas that people always run into when they start working with view templates. The first is this little checkbox over here, this include, do not include. The reason this guy is so important is this will often bite people in the butt. So as an example, let's say this scale, you saw how my scale changed when I updated this, right? Well, let's do the same thing, but this time, if I go to architecture plan and I'm going to go to annotation and grids, okay, and I say, okay, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to uncheck scale, and let's see what happens. Look at that. So the grids went away, but the scale, I can change this to whatever I want. So I could go through and make this a different scale. So I often use this as an example if you have like overall plans versus construction plans. And that's one way you can get around that. Now, the other problem where this bites you now is some people will go through and they'll change this to a different scale and they'll hit OK. And how come it didn't update? Now, it may seem obvious to you because you just saw, I just showed you, if you uncheck it, it doesn't apply. You check it, it does apply. But this is a their gotcha that often happens where people will just go through and update information in their view template, but they don't pay attention to this include, do not include. So I really want you to try to remember and think about that, because I'm as guilty of anybody of forgetting about that. So what you want to think about when you're using your view template or your template, your Revit template, is also thinking about what kind of view templates do you want applied to your views. Different views are going to have different settings. And so it's going to really help with efficiency. The other example is for consistency. So like if my floor plan, I have, say I'm really excited about furniture, but my colleague Jennifer is not excited about furniture. And so I'm like, you know what? Furniture needs to be on all the floor plans. And she's like, no, the furniture we use is view templates for the consistency, so it can apply to multiple views and create that consistency where one person doesn't have it on and another person have it off. So it creates that consistency, which is super, super helpful. So I'm going to keep on moving. The other thing I want to talk about is once your template is set up, and we're going to talk about some different things that go into a template, but let's talk real quick about configuring it. So we have this template. It's an RTE file. That's how you know it's a template versus an RVT file, which is a project. Okay. And so once I have this template saved somewhere, what you want to do at your firm is you want to make sure that the files are configured correctly. So now what you do is you go to, on everybody's machine, what you'll have to do is go to Big R, and you go to Options, and you go to File Locations. And so right here, this is where all the templates exist. So you can have multiple templates in here that you can pick from. Now what I want to do is I want to add, in this example, I'm going to be adding my firm's template. So we're going to use this, let's use this one right here, this LLD Revit template, okay? So I just added that, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these other ones because those are just kind of garbage. I don't want any of the Autodesk ones. I want my firm's template, right? And so I'll say okay. And what I want to show you now is, since I've done that, when I go to start a new project, look at this. I just have this one option. There's no option to pick from other templates, but just the one firm's template. This is something that often gets missed in a lot of firms. I'm sad to say. I know those of you that are on the line, you're like, Bill, I know all this. My firm does this. I set it all up. That is awesome. But there are a lot of firms that I have seen that miss this step. They go through all the power of creating their template, but then they don't have it configured for that person's machine. All right. So make sure that you configure that, and that's how you can set that up on your template. Now, another thing that often comes up is this idea of using project files for a template. Now, what do I mean when I say using a project file for a template? I'm going to give away some of my secrets here if I don't close this stuff. I'm going to open up my project file that I originally had, and let's do this. I'm just going to pen that. So what some people like, and if you think about work sets, you know, work sets are this magical thing that allow you to either turn on or off things globally while you're opening up your session. But they also have this visible in all views checkbox, which is also there, got you, by the way. Now, opening and closing views is a per individual setting. But this visible in all views is a global setting. And so within here, there's some setup that happens for every project and certain work sets that you use all the time, regardless. A good example of this is the code work set. And so the code work set is something that I may not necessarily, say I have some general model line-based egress family, okay? Well, that's a 3D thing that I can have, and it can truck up downstairs and everything else, but I don't necessarily want the code information showing up on all my plans. So I can uncheck that. So that's really important. But the thing is I set that up on every single project. Similarly, if you're like a full service firm, and even if you're not a full service firm, but you have like, you know, your mechanical, electrical, plumbing consultants, often you're creating work sets for them as well. You're creating all these different work set files. This is, again, something that you're often setting up for almost every single project. So I do know firms, some of what they do is they actually, rather than working off of a template file proper, they will create a Revit central file that exists on their server with all the work sets set up. And I've talked about some of the pros and cons of this. There are cons specifically of trying to think about when you link those files in, not only making sure they're on the right work set, but we've talked about, like, do you preload or pre-bake some of those LinkedIn files so that the origin is correct? And there's all kinds of rabbit holes we could go down of how far do you want to take this pre-population of information into a template. Now, I personally wouldn't recommend linking in the files to your project template file, if you will. I think it serves some challenges. The other thing with the work sets, I think this is beneficial. It is helpful. And if you're setting it up for every single project, it's something that you could consider creating. Now, the process would be a little different. So if you did do that, instead of starting a new project from your template, what you would do is you would navigate every user, and it takes a little bit of training, would have to go to that project file, that RVT file that exists, and they would have to detach from central, and they would have to go through and detach and preserve the work sets, right? Because we want to retain those. And then they would save this into their respective file out on the network. And so that is one process of creating a central file from a central file with the work sets already loaded. So that's something to think about. And I'd be curious to see, like, you know, if some people think that's a value, or is that just total hogwash? So the other thing I want to touch on is another question I get is, how do you take into account different project types? Let's say that you're a firm and you do commercial work, you also do residential work. Say you're a firm and you do judicial work, but you also do science and technology, and you do multifamily. And there's all these different project types that exist, and all the demands and the needs of a lot of those projects. And I would say one way you can get around that is with the use of resource files. And if you haven't heard of a resource file, don't worry, a lot of people haven't. Some people call them container files. I've heard quite a few different words for them. But I have this resource file, and I just want to kind of give an example here. And so if I open up my resource file, it's a file that exists as a project file. Now, the beauty of this is that it has information in here specifically that I may or not want in my template. You know, I may or may not want every single casework family from my library, my Revit library in there. But I could create a resource file that houses this. Say that I do a lot of science and technology and I got custom casework. You know, you could house a lot of that science and technology casework or equipment in this file. The other nice thing about this is we're a visual you know, group where we want to see things visually. And so you could go through and see this information rather than what I say, double clicking your life away through Windows Explorer. There's also some great tools that exist that help with content management. One of the advantages for a resource file, though, is that you can house wall assemblies in them, or ceilings, or other types of system-based families that you usually cannot navigate or use in some of these third-party apps. There are some that exist, but this is one way that you could use a resource file to house some of this information. Why in the world would you put a wall in a resource file, you might ask? Well, when was the last time you used a 4-hour rated wall? Probably not very often. You do use them on projects, not every project. And so you want to think about, well, maybe I could house some of my wall types in that resource file so my template's not completely flooded with that. That's a good example. Tristan's also asking, couldn't you use Dynamo script to automatically create all those worksets in the file? I would have to double check on the use of worksets with Dynamo. I have, in the context of that, though, I have had the discussion of what if we just had a script you ran, and based on if you were using, say, you know, the science and technology template, but you're not using the multifamily, you could write a script that does that. It can go ahead and purge all the information. Again, the challenge is training. And a lot of this stuff is just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should. And we got John saying that you can definitely do that. Thanks, John. He says, shout out to Rhythm, has a workset node for that you could use. So that's a good point. Thanks, John. So you could use Dynamo scripts to manage some of this purging or creation of information. The challenge is that a training exercise that you want your whole staff to know how to operate. And so that was something that we actually decided not to move forward with for another client. So we did create a commercial template, but we also created a residential template. You know, this was something I kind of went back and forth on and was wondering, you know, is that really something we should do? Or would it be, because I wanted everything to live in one place. I just wanted it all in this, you know, this master project file. The problem is that script, again, people would have to know to use it when they would get in there. And I was kind of concerned that it might monkey it up a little bit. And so we actually created a separate template. Well, what's so different, even say from a commercial template to a residential template? You know, you're the same firm, you're using probably a lot of the same door tags and other information. Well, there is a lot of stuff in a commercial template that doesn't need to be in a residential template. For example, all of the IBC stuff, like this is everything I'm clicking on right now has to do exclusively with a commercial template. And so in here, you may not want to, you know, muddy up your residential template with all of these schedules. Theoretically, you could leave them in there if you wanted to. Again, you know, are you double clicking your life away? Are you reading through every one of these to have to try to figure out which schedule you really wanted? So I would say that the use of resource files can many times overcome the challenge of having multiple Revit templates. That's the big takeaway from this point. And the second is that it is appropriate, and I'm not anti-multiple template workflow, but it has to be justified. And so I would say that if you do have multiple templates, that is appropriate, that is okay. Another good example would be is if you do a lot of government projects. You know, those guys have a lot of certain line types and layers that you need with your export settings. For those that don't know, you can create multiple export settings within your export dialog box here. So I can go through and I can create multiple export settings with different layer styles. But if you have certain wall types or things like that, or certain clients that you just work with all the time, it could make sense to create a new Revit template for that as well. Does anybody have any questions about that? I'll let you guys fill in the chat window there if you guys have questions or thoughts or comments. Totally disagree with me, that is completely fine. So if there's any thoughts or comments, feel free to drop them in there. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on trucking. So the other thing I wanted to mention within when you're thinking of content and within a template, and it's not specific to template, but it's the content that may exist in your template. And often we get the question about, well, how should a family be hosted? And so when you have families, I'm a big non-wall hosted guy. So like in here, this wall hung casework is not associated to that wall. If it was, the geometry would go away. Now, a lot of people like wall hosted content because if you move the wall, the content doesn't go along for the ride. Now, how come this one did right over here? Well, what you have is this parameter called moves with nearby elements. And if you don't know this, it's a nice little nugget. If you move the element, the information goes along for the ride. So that's a pretty cool feature. So you don't have to always have wall hung content. You can actually get around that with the moves with nearby element. The other problem with wall hosted content or any other kind of hosted content is the issue you run into with groups. So if you have a project and you have this wall that exists in a group, but the casework is outside of that group, what the heck happens? Well, I'll tell you what happens. A lot of times it breaks. It starts muddying up your project. You get all kinds of warnings. You have content that starts deleting. It's a very, very, very bad deal. And so you want to try to mitigate using hosted content, in my opinion, in general. If you do have to use hosted content, face-based. Use face-based. Would not make it associated to a specific category. So that's my 2 cents. There's also a point to be made from the MEP side. If you have ceiling-based content, you cannot host that to a linked model. It's a limitation within the program. And so what you want to do is make sure that that content is face-based, and then you will be able to host it to a linked model. So that's something to think about. So I'm going to keep moving on. What about details? You know, how many details should you have in your project? You know, when you have common general building details that you use all the time, this is a good question as far as like, well, Do we just throw our entire general building detail library into the template? No, it's very, very bad. Don't do that. Reason is because you're just bringing a bunch of crap, again, that you may or may not use. Some of those details you may, say it's a roof drain detail. Well, maybe you'll use that. Maybe you won't. Maybe it needs to be changed. And so what I would recommend doing is having a resource file that houses those general building details. So let me show you an example of that. Make sure I got the right one here. Okay. So what I can do is I'm just going to delete a couple of these views here. And many of you guys probably already know this. If you do, don't start checking your Facebook status. Just hang in there with me. So what you can do is you can actually insert views from files. They have to be drafting views. That's the kicker. So what I did is I did insert views from file. I'm going to navigate to where my project file is, my general building detail resource file. And so if I go and I pick this file, and you can see I'm using the same one, but let's just pretend it's our general building detail file. And what I can do is you get this option that comes up. And so I can pick those general building details that I want to bring in to my project. And notice I can bring in views and sheets, drafting views only, schedules and reports, or sheets only. But you can't bring in live views because those are live. They're a live section, right? And so if I go ahead and I'll just accept this one up here, it then gets added to my project. And so I think I already had that one. Might be round tripping it here. And so you can go ahead and bring in these details into your project, and it can have all the information in there. So that's a way you can get around using general building details in a resource file. In case you haven't picked up on it, I'm a big fan of resource files. I like them a lot. I think they're super useful. They're great for navigating and trying to see things, especially visually. So pretty cool stuff. Okay, landing pages. Oh my gosh. How many firms has had the almost fist fight over what should go on a landing page? You know, it's up there with the CAD standards. Let's see if I can open up the right file. This one. Okay. So the landing page. The great thing about a landing page is, and this is one of ones we did for another client, is that it's a great resource of being able to house information when people open the file. We're noticing a little bit of Revit 2017 in here of the text editing. If you guys haven't noticed, 2017 text editing is awesome. Watch out for some there gotchas with the wrapping. You got to make sure you clean that up when you upgrade to 17. So the landing page serves as a communication device, and there's certain information you can put on here. You can put in model maintenance data, such as the one last time warnings were reviewed. This is a good way of completely shaming people and making them feel bad about themselves. You can say, listen, we need to fill this out. When was the last time you did it? I noticed you either did not fill it out at all, or it's been 7 months and the project is about to explode. So you want to make sure that this information is getting filled out. And so in here, we can go ahead and fill in, because I'm a good model manager. So I'm going to say, you know what, I did this in June. No, I can't do it in the future. I got to do it today. My birthday is June 1st, by the way, for anyone that cares. Okay, May 18th is when I did it. Today is the year 2017. And then you can have that information populate. And you know, it took, what, 3 seconds to populate that? So that way everyone's on the same page as far as when the models are being managed, what dates, who's responsible for it. That way you can send out a mass email shaming that individual that they have not updated their model maintenance information. Other important information could be the design team information. You can put in things such as their phone number, email address, things like the project status, who's the owner, sheet references to the project issue dates. You can put in information such as to the team, hey, I updated the door schedule. Just wanted to let you guys know. So that way you can create a log of that on your landing page as well. In general, most firms never, ever, ever use the landing page. They're probably one of those things, much like your, what do you call it? Like your BIM book, your catalog, your BIM manual that you have at your firm. These most people don't use, but they're extremely powerful if you do use them. Usually it's the uber nerdy people or only the BIM manager that's using them. So be nice to your BIM manager and use them. They're super helpful. The other thing, I don't know if I mentioned or not, that's important about a landing page, and this is becoming less critical, is that it wants to be the page that when you open the file. And so when you open the file, you want this to be your main page when saving or opening the file. And that helps for open and save times. And so what you want to do is make sure that this view in here is the default view for that. And I'm actually completely drawing a blank on where you do that. I thought it was under view. Maybe it's manage. Someone remind me. Yeah, here we go, manage, starting view. And so in here I can pick which view is my starting view. So isn't it, you know, honestly, it's a view, like it's your starting view. Shouldn't it be under the view tab? Can I get like an amen? Like if it should be under the view tab because it's your starting view, I would see it be right around here, maybe under Windows. Manage, maybe. I could see it should be in both places. They do that for multiple tools. Put it in both places, darn it. John says manage. Dang it. All right, maybe I'll get outvoted. So I would say put it in both places. That's my final statement on that. Okay, landing page, we talked about that. Let's talk about a few little things that I personally have put into a few templates and I think they're useful. Let's look at some code stuff. Everybody loves some good code. Don't fall asleep on me now. Code stuff is important and it will keep you from getting in trouble, all right? Now, what I often do, now follow me just for a little bit. I'm trying not to make this super complicated. And by the way, the tag calculated value is garbage in 17. It was supposed to help with code stuff. It doesn't do it if you use a key schedule. At least, I guess, it does do it for some things. But you got to put in the occupant load factor manually, which is a bunch of garbage. I'm just going to say it. So I'm a little, sorry, I get a little worked up about this. I get on my soapbox. So what I do a lot of times is I create a key schedule. If you don't know key schedules, well, talk to me. We'll grab a beer. We'll talk about what key schedules are. They basically allow you to mass populate data by populating one parameter. They're freaking awesome. Really, really powerful. So what I want to do is I want to say in the key schedule, for every time I pick one of these guys, give me my load factor based on the IBC, okay? And so what I do is I create this working code schedule. And so what I can do is I can, if I pick, you can see that I have my square footage for my area. Just to back this up, I should give you guys a little context here. So I have a code view here that's an area plan, okay? I got my area tag, and it has some parameters that are linked to my summary, okay? And so that's where my square footage is coming from. It's from that area that I've placed it on. Now, based on which one I pick, note that the occupant load factor will update. You see that? So based on which type of occupancy type that I have in here, it updates, okay? So this is pretty cool because what it's doing is it's taking the area times the load factor that gives you your occupant load, okay? Now, what you'll notice is that this information doesn't jive, okay? So what I need to do is I need to make sure that the information in my tag is updated. That's the purpose of this working code schedule, okay? Now, I won't get into it, but you can't do it this way with the new 2017 tag calculated values because I can't get the darn parameter from a key schedule into a shared parameter file to be added to my tag. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into it right now, but that's the problem. It's the challenge. You can't do it. So in here, what I've done is I have these parameters that exist that are doing the heavy lifting. Okay, so in here I have a live, I guess, a calculated value based on what's being picked. And then I have the one that's for the tag. And then I have what that square footage divided by the occupant load factor is my load. And then I have the one for the tag again next to that. So this one here is dumb data. This one here is dumb data next to the live one. So that way you can go through and you can say, you know what, this is 40, this is 35, and then you can go ahead and move on. So now if I go back to my floor plan, you can see that my tag has updated. So this is dumb data that you still have to type in. Now, you guys are going to ask me, can Dynamo do that? Yes, Dynamo can serve and push this data back and forth. This is not a Dynamo session, so I'm not going to show that workflow. I will delegate that to the very cunning and smart John Pearson, who will show you guys that either in the blog or another time. But yes, you can take Dynamo scripts, pull parameter data, push parameter data, and it works beautimous. It's awesome. So that's something you can do. And you could even use Dynamo Player, so you don't even have to open up Dynamo. You can just run Dynamo Player, and it will update it. So that's a pretty cool workflow that you can do. Okay. The other one that I did, which was pretty cool, was a solar analysis. So it's actually, you know what, it's kind of a poor man's solar analysis, to be honest. So in Boulder, I live in Boulder, just so you guys know. We're in Boulder, and Boulder's crazy about solar analysis and making sure that you can prove that out. And so you can definitely use, you know, the shadow studies. That said, Boulder doesn't accept that sometimes. Sometimes they want to see graphically where some of this stuff lands. And you know what? I made this poor man's solar analysis that I want to show you guys real quick, just because it's pretty cool, and it gives an example of how you can populate some of this information. Oh, look, I got my view template on. That's probably hosing this. Make sure all of my stuff's showing. There we go. Okay, so what's cool about templates is that you can, you know, pre-populate or set up your schedules, right? You can set up your views. And again, what it does is it saves time. So if I go to place this solar analysis component, this is a Revit family, all right, that I built. And it basically has some math that it's doing in here. And I'm not going to get into this much, but it's basically doing some math for solar analysis, so that way you can get your length of your shadow, so you can document it, because Boulder doesn't allow you to use shadows sometimes, which is kind of silly. So in here, I have these different components that I have in my template. Again, this is the theme, it's the template. And so what I can do is I can put this information that's important to you, whatever is important to you in your template and your project. And then it's populating that schedule, very similar to door schedule or anything else. The point being in here is that you can update information. Again, this is kind of a poor man's version of this. But if I update this, my shadow updates, my shadow lines update for 10 a.m., 12, and 2. And it's also updating in my schedule, giving me my my information, which is important. So the reason, the context of this is, say this is a property line where this grid line is. Well, now I've exceeded where that shadow can land. So I either got to move my roof pitch down, move it somewhere else. It doesn't overlay or overlap that property line. So there's a lot of cool things that you can add to your template, that being one of them. You can also put in things like your door schedule. The other one I wanted to show too is, you know, you can put in calculated values in these schedules, which is pretty cool. So this part's free, wasn't part of it, but I'll share it with you real quick. What you can do, I think I have the right one open. Maybe I don't. No, I don't. I think this is the old one. I had one that I was going to show as an example, and I don't know where. I think this is it. Yeah, this is it. And so a lot of times you can have hidden parameters. I should just do a session on schedules sometime. But you want to try to think about these schedules that you use all the time. So this client was using floor area ratio schedules, and she doesn't want to set it up for every project, but she wants it sorted and grouped a certain way, and she wants the information to populate such. So I have this user input parameter. And what I can do is I just will uncheck this hidden field, and then now it's available. Now let me show you kind of how this works, because if it's not checked, it will not show the information. So if I go back here, formatting, user input, uncheck the hidden, you can either check or uncheck this, and it will show either information that exists in this area column, or do some math and show that it's the calculated floor area ratio based on parameters, blah, blah, blah. Boring stuff, but it allows you to not have to set it up for every project. Point being is that you can really build some intelligence into your template, whether you're doing solar analysis, floor area ratios, code analysis. Get this stuff in there. This is good stuff that you don't want to set up for every project, or worse yet, do manually. Definitely want to think about that. So with that, I want to see if you guys have any thoughts or comments or questions on some of this. I see some chatter in there about Dynamo. Dynamo is great for us. For average user, not so much, not as interested in Dynamo. That's fair. Dynamo is one of those things that I say you can use at different levels. Okay, so a principal, for example, will probably never use Dynamo, but they need to know it exists and that it can automate functions and routines within their project. There's people that are going to need to interact with the script and just run it. You don't necessarily need to know how to author it, but you could run it if it makes your life easier, if it auto tags stuff, or if it can create a room data sheet for you and populate data so you're not beating your head against the wall or manually filling that out. That would help you. The other person is a person that actually edits it and actually updates the schedule or the Dynamo scripts for their particular firm. So there's a lot of different levels or different places of interaction with Dynamo, either just knowing it exists, interacting with it minimally, or hardcore using Dynamo to author scripts for your firm. The roof ventilation schedule someone's asking about. Yes, I put in the roof ventilation schedule into client's residential template. And so we had, yeah, I think is it this one? Roof ventilation, it's in our, yeah, so we have it in this commercial one and we had it in a roof one. And there is, again, a bunch of boring calculations that are going on here using calculated values, but they help make your life easier. So yeah, you can use roof ventilation schedules as well. I don't know if this is set up to show right now, but yeah, you can do that. So Bill's asking, some people would say, some say you should make a new template every Revit year. What's my take on that? I would say you don't have to create a new Revit template every single year. I'm a big fan of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I would upgrade a template before I would rebuild it. You can transfer the information. Maybe, Bill, you could unpack a little more, but I would say unless it's tied to some kind of corruption that can happen from upgrading a template file that I might not be readily aware of, or maybe it's new features. A lot of those new features can be included. A good example of that, to Bill's point, is you know, this landing page that I was showing, like the font changed in this year. For 2017, and this is an old template. I did update it in the client's project. This was old example file I was using. So, you know, when you update it, there are these little issues that come up from upgrading your file. But, you know, I would say that it's easier to edit some of those rather than having to build it from scratch. Can you explain how to add total number of sheets? Sorry, can you explain how can add total sheets number on the sheets. For example, we have 6 sheets in total, therefore we'll have sheets 1 of 6, 2 of 6. Oh, good question. Yes, I have done that before. And I want to say, someone correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong, but I think you have to do that either manually or with Dynamo. You would create your parameter. Basically, you could have a count. You could have a schedule that even counts your total number of sheets, but then you would have to create a instance parameter for every sheet that would have 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12. But I think you could do that with Dynamo. And John's saying he's used Bluebeam to do that before, but I think I would look at Dynamo as well. Yeah, APIs, macros, a lot of discussion about Dynamo. We do a lot of Dynamo sessions, so maybe we need to do more. Yeah, so Tony Crawford, you said, and that's a good friend of mine. I'm glad you're here, bud. It's good to see you. Said that he's seen minor corruption that show up from upgrading templates. Maybe creating it every 2 to 3 years, possibly, you know. If it is corrupting, then yes, but I have not, haven't experienced that myself personally. So I would say definitely, if you know, Tony, that that's an issue, you could consider it. I personally wouldn't do it. I'd wait till it broke and then go, oh man, yeah, we need to update that, or it needs to kind of have some kind of tie to that we know of for sure that that's going to happen. So other thoughts or questions? These are good questions. I'm glad you guys are interacting so good. We got Devin on the line. Good to see you, Devin. Good friend of mine in Denver. Other questions, thoughts, or comments you guys have? Yeah, so John says biggest issue he saw was when railings changed from 14 to 15. There's a whole protocol when you're upgrading files, just so you know. Specifically, we talked about the 2017 text change. There was other issues specifically associated to topography, if I can say that, to topography, where you have issues with topography getting goofed up a little bit from 2016 to 2017. So you want to definitely check the notes to see what's being changed from version to version. Do a couple tests and see what the ramifications are. In regards to corruption too, you could even try, gosh, I'm trying to think if there's some good ways to test that, either binding your, like an existing built project to your new template just to give it a test, not on the live one, but like on a test project, just to test corruption, things like that. There's some ways you could do that. Yes, so some people are asking if it's going to be recorded. This is recorded. It's going to show up on YouTube. If you are watching this on YouTube, please make sure you guys subscribe to our channel. Check out our blog. There's some really good resources, free resources we want to just hook you guys up with. So how long would it take to create a fresh template in case people want to overlay cautious? Gosh, it's a really time-intensive process to create a template from scratch. You can transfer project standards. You can copy-paste schedules. You can mitigate some of that. It's probably, depending on how robust your template is, this one has quite a bit of information and a lot of stuff in it. It could be a couple days to a couple weeks, depending on how much stuff you have in there. Do material textures embed in the template file, or is that a link or file? So material textures are, if I understand the question, is a link. Your materials point to a location, and if those don't exist, it can't find it. So that's something to be aware of. So any kind of materials that you have in here, these are pointing to a certain location. And I've seen like where these get removed, you don't see them anymore. So yeah, want to watch out for that one. Yep, definitely. Yeah, so Tony, you say you ran into corruption 3 or 4 months ago after upgrading. So definitely, that's hard, man. That's a tough spot to be in. So yeah, double check that. Devin says it's about a 30-hour baseline to start from scratch or to get it transferred over. So that's a good point. Thanks for the input. So, man, I like it. You guys are active in the chat window. Any other thoughts or comments? Cool. So I hope you guys have appreciated this. If you have thoughts or questions about creating templates, feel free to shoot me an email, bill.allen@evolvelab-inc.com. You guys can check out our website, evolvebim.com. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. We're doing this YouTube live for the first time, actually second time, first time for me. I think it worked out pretty good. Hopefully it worked out good for you guys. And if you guys have any other thoughts, comments, or questions, please just drop them in the comments after the video is done, or you can go to our website and drop them in on the blog, send them to me, and be happy to help you guys out with any of that. It's been a real awesome time hanging out with you guys. It's over my lunch hour. It's 12:56 here. So thanks for coming in and checking things out, guys. And if you have anything else, just stop on by. We'll talk to you soon.